Next time, read the room, K-Money.
Dad, read the room.
Read the room.
Could you tell me what he said? But next time, read the room. Let's suppose you walk into a meeting where everyone's serious and tense, but someone cracks a loud joke and no one laughs. You might quietly tell them, next time, read the room. It means to understand the emotional atmosphere or social situation before speaking or acting. It's used when someone fails to notice or understand the mood or social vibe around them. The phrase, read the room, means being socially aware, picking up on people's emotions, tone, or energy before reacting.
I would say, don't count your chickens before they're hatched.
The first one is, don't count your chickens before they hatch. The first one is, don't count your chickens before they hatch.
Could you tell me what he said? The first one is, don't count your chickens before they hatch. Let's suppose someone just applied for a job and is already planning how they'll spend their first paycheck before even getting hired. Their friend laughs and says, hey, don't count your chickens before they hatch. It means don't assume something will happen before it actually does. It's said when someone is celebrating success or making plans too early. In American English, this proverb warns against being overconfident about future results. It reminds people to wait until something truly happens before making decisions or celebrating.
Fucking petrified.
It was fucking petrified. It was fucking petrified. It was fucking petrified.
Could you tell me what he said? I was fucking petrified. Let's suppose you're walking alone at night and suddenly hear footsteps right behind you. Your heart races, your body freezes, and you can't even turn around. You'd say, I was fucking petrified. It means to be so frightened that you are unable to move or react. It's used when fear completely takes over and leaves you unable to move or think clearly. It originally comes from the idea of turning into stone, like petrify means to turn to stone. People use it both for real fear, I was petrified when I saw the snake, and emotional fear, I was petrified to speak in public.
I'm a people person.
I really like how you're a people person.
Real people person.
I really like how you're a people person.
Could you tell me what he said? I really like how you're a people person. Let's suppose you're at work and one of your coworkers always greets everyone with a smile, remembers names, and makes others feel comfortable. You watch them chatting easily with everyone and say, I really like how you're a people person. It means someone who enjoys being around people and communicates well with them. A people person is someone who connects easily with others, warm, sociable, and emotionally intelligent. They're often the type who makes group settings fun and handles social situations smoothly.
I have to say I'm somewhat taken aback.
Taken aback.
Taken aback?
I'm a little taken aback.
Could you tell me what he said? I am a little taken aback. Let's suppose you're at a meeting and your boss suddenly criticizes a project you thought was perfect. You pause, surprised, and think, I am a little taken aback. It means to be surprised or shocked by something unexpected. In American English, taken aback describes a reaction of sudden surprise or astonishment. It can be mild or strong, depending on the situation.
Flying is not my cup of tea. Flying is not my cup of tea. Flying is not my cup of tea.
Could you tell me what he said? Flying is not my cup of tea. Let's suppose someone invites you to go skydiving, but you don't enjoy extreme activities. You shrug and say, flying is not my cup of tea. It means something that someone likes or enjoys, or doesn't. It's used when someone wants to say they don't like or enjoy something. In American English, cup of tea is a polite, figurative way to express preference. Saying something is not your cup of tea means it's not enjoyable or appealing to you, while saying something is your cup of tea means you like it.
Read my lips.
Read my lips.
Read my lips.
Could you tell me what he said? Read my lips. Let's suppose a manager is frustrated with repeated mistakes at work. She leans forward, points at the team, and firmly says, read my lips. No more errors. It means listen carefully and pay attention to what is being said, often as a strict warning or instruction. It's used to emphasize something important that someone must pay attention to or obey. In American English, read my lips is a strong, attention-grabbing way to stress that the listener must take the statement seriously.
Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane, stay in your lane.
Could you tell me what he said? Stay in your lane. Let's suppose you're in a meeting and a coworker starts giving advice about a project that isn't their responsibility. You quietly think they should stay in their lane. It means to mind your own business or stick to what you know or are responsible for. Figuratively, it tells someone not to overstep, meddle, or give input outside their role or knowledge. It's often used to set boundaries.
I know you're older now, so stop acting like a child.
To stop acting like a child. To stop acting like a child.
Could you tell me what he said? We've got to stop acting like a child. Let's suppose two coworkers are arguing over something minor, throwing sarcastic comments at each other instead of solving the problem. One sighs and says, "We've got to stop acting like a child." It means behaving immaturely, foolishly, or without responsibility, like a child. It's used when someone behaves immaturely, pettily, or irresponsibly. In American English, acting like a child describes behavior that is not appropriate for an adult, whining, sulking, throwing tantrums, or overreacting.
Don't ever stop and smell the roses.
It's just, I think she just wants me to stop and smell the roses more. It's just, I think she just wants me to stop and smell the roses more.
Could you tell me what she said? It's just, I think she just wants me to stop and smell the roses more. Let's suppose you've been working nonstop on a big project, skipping meals and ignoring breaks. A friend notices and says, "I think she just wants you to stop and smell the roses more." It means to take time to relax and enjoy the small, pleasant things in life. It's used when someone wants you to slow down and enjoy life instead of rushing through everything. In American English, stop and smell the roses is a figurative way to remind someone not to focus only on work, stress, or goals.
First time in my life I am stumped. First time in my life I am stumped. First time in my life I am stumped.
Could you tell me what she said? But for the first time in my life, I am stumped. Let's suppose you're trying to solve a very tricky puzzle or answer a question you've never seen before. No matter how hard you think, you can't figure it out. You sigh and say, "But for the first time in my life, I am stumped." It means to be completely puzzled, confused, or unsure how to respond. It's used when someone is completely confused or unsure what to do.
Like you got a bad case of puppy love.
Puppy love.
Hashtag puppy love.
Could you tell me what he said? Look like you got a bad case of puppy love. Let's suppose a teenager keeps talking about their crush nonstop, writing notes, and daydreaming at school. An older sibling teases them and says, "Looks like you got a bad case of puppy love." It means a youthful, innocent, or first-time crush, often intense but short-lived. It's used when someone is experiencing a young or innocent romantic infatuation. Puppy love refers to the strong but usually temporary romantic feelings often felt by teenagers.
I believe in love at first sight.
The idea that I could fall in love at first sight is romantic nonsense. The idea that I could fall in love at first sight is romantic nonsense. The idea that I could fall in love at first sight is romantic nonsense.
Could you tell me what he said? The idea that I could fall in love at first sight is romantic nonsense. Let's suppose someone tells you they met a person at a coffee shop and instantly felt a strong attraction, thinking they were destined to be together. You shake your head and say, "The idea that I could fall in love at first sight is romantic nonsense." It means to develop immediate romantic feelings for someone the moment you see them. In American English, fall in love at first sight describes sudden, immediate attraction. It's often idealized in movies and stories, but the phrase emphasizes the instant emotional connection that feels like love.
Oh, you talk the talk, but do you walk the walk?
If you don't talk the talk, you gotta walk the walk. If you don't talk the talk, you gotta walk the walk.
Could you tell me what he said? You talk the talk, you gotta walk the walk. Let's suppose a friend keeps boasting about how fit and disciplined they are, but when it's time to actually run a marathon or follow their routine, they skip it. You shake your head and say, "You talk the talk, you gotta walk the walk." It means if you claim or boast about something, you must prove it by your actions. In American English, talk the talk means to speak confidently about abilities or intentions, while walk the walk means to act accordingly. The phrase emphasizes the importance of consistency between words and deeds.
Money talks, bullshit walk.
Money talks, bullshit walks.
Money talks, bullshit walk.
Could you tell me what he said? Money talks, bullshit walks. Let's suppose a business meeting where everyone is making promises about investments or deals. One person says grand things without backing them up, while another brings actual funds to the table. You think, money talks, bullshit walks. It means money has influence and gets results, while empty promises or talk achieve nothing. It's used when only real action or money matters, not empty words. This phrase contrasts real power or results with useless words or talk.
Till death do you part.
Till death do you part. Till death do you part.
Could you tell me what he said? Till death do us part. Let's suppose a couple deeply in love is making heartfelt promises to each other, expressing their devotion and commitment. One of them says, "Till death do us part." It means a vow or promise to stay together for life, until one partner dies. It's used when making a promise of lifelong commitment, especially in marriage. In American English, "till death do us part" is a traditional phrase symbolizing lifelong fidelity and commitment.
Any day above ground is a good day.
Any day above ground is a good day.
Every day above ground is a good day, sir.
Could you tell me what he said? Every day above ground is a good day for me now. Let's suppose someone has recently recovered from a serious illness or survived a dangerous situation. They smile and say, every day above ground is a good day for me now. It means being alive is a blessing, and each day is valuable. It's used when a person feels grateful simply for being alive. Every day above ground is a figurative way to express gratitude for life. It emphasizes appreciating life itself rather than material success or specific achievements.
Sickness and health till death do you part. Sickness and health till death do you part. Sickness and health till death do you part.
Could you tell me what he said? And sickness and health till death do you part. Let's suppose a couple deeply in love is exchanging vows, promising to stay together no matter what life brings. They say, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. It means a promise to stay with and support your partner through both good and bad times, for life. It's used when lovers vow to remain committed through both good times and difficult times, including illness or challenges. If this video has taught you something new, please like and subscribe.